Welcome everyone. Welcome to this React workshop. So today we're going to be covering the basics of React. So don't worry if you haven't learned React before. All we need to know is just a bit of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and we should be set for today. So my name's Eden Chan. I'm currently studying computer science at the University of Waterloo. I just finished my first years, and I'm currently on my first internship as a full stack developer at Wawanesa Insurance. So at work, I'm currently using React and AWS to build full stack web applications as part of like an innovation lab. So what we do is we just build these websites to demonstrate a proof of concept. So we're just trying to show whether a feature that we're trying to like implement on the main like company page might be something that's worth integrating into that company page. So there's a lot of web development involved in this role, and it's really exciting stuff because I get to experiment a lot with new technologies. Currently, I'm also working a bit with Python and learning a bit of like machine learning on the side. Like machine learning was something that I've been meaning to get into for for quite some time. And you know, like with this Learnathon happening, I'm finally deciding, hey, it's summer. It's the perfect time to learn something new. So outside of work, I really love to write, and actually started my own little blog. So right here's the link. So yeah, Oren, let's go. Yeah, drop your email and sub for free. Let's go. Yeah, and that's been pretty much the highlight so far of my summer, you know, starting that blog. Okay, let's go. All right, so today, what's on the agenda for today for this workshop? So we're going to be covering the basics of React. So we're going to understand like why people use React, why it's so popular in the industry, and like what are the cool features that React offers that makes it so popular and useful in creating like really awesome web applications. So throughout this workshop, we're going to be creating a mini project from scratch, and throughout this project, we're going to be working with a lot of like key concepts that are covered if we want to build like cool applications in React, such as components and props. And we're going to also work with state. So we're going to explain that a bit more in depth later. And after we're done building that mini project, we're going to be exploring a few like resources and a couple of ways that we can learn new technologies like React effectively and like have fun while we're doing that. And then I'll be taking in some questions and answers throughout this workshop. So let's get this spread. Let's get the spread. So React, what is React? React is a JavaScript library. So it's just a bunch of code that other people have written combined together so that you can create really powerful applications with React. So there's a bunch of like dependencies, like other files of code that are bundled up together, and that builds React. Okay, so it's really in demand in the industry. Currently, the last time I checked, there were at least more than 7 million websites that were built using React. So if you've ever like stumbled a really cool looking website like from like a big company, chances are it was probably built with React. And because of how popular React is, there's a lot of support for this new technology. Like you'll see a lot of trends in web development where like a lot of new technologies come and go. There's a lot of innovation around web development, and like because of that, it's it's really interesting to see how much innovation is happening from all these different new technologies that were built to support like development with React. So we've got really popular frameworks like Material UI, which a lot of big companies use to build their like web apps, and we've also got like Next.js, which is really popular. I know like big companies like Netflix uses this to create like their streaming platform. So because of that, because of all this like support that's going around in like the developer community, it makes React a really powerful tool to leverage when you're trying to build cool things. It's not just limited to like web applications. React is also really compatible with a lot of other technologies like Node, Express, and a bunch of other frameworks. So you're not just building a website, but you're building like a lot of functionality attached to that website with React as well. So why would we use React in the first place? Like why? It's popular, we get it, but why is it popular? React is a really powerful tool to build web applications because of how it renders the web page on your computer. So when you visit a website, what you see is a single page application. So what does that mean? All that means is that all the content that you see on that website is going to be hosted on a single page. So this ties in with the idea of an interactive user interface with something called the virtual DOM. So when you're looking at a website, you're looking at a web page, what you're looking at is it's a document. It's a document of like different components. It's called, so DOM is short for Document Object Model. And what that means is that when you're on a website, we've got a bunch of different HTML and like CSS to style those like different components. There are a lot of different parts that you see on a website, right? And the thing about React is that it makes all these different parts have their own states. So we call these different parts of like the website that you see components, and you'll be hearing this term a lot throughout like development with React. So the main like takeaway from this is that when you're developing in React, you want to make sure that you split up the code that you make into reusable components so that it's a lot easier to work with. Because when you're like building a really big project with like vanilla JavaScript or let's say even PHP, all the files that you ever build can get really messy, especially when you're working with other people. So that's the nice and like powerful feature of React. You split your code into components so that when someone's like, when you're working with other people, the code that you share with them is really reusable. And it's, you try to like organize your code into components. And one thing that helps organize your code into components is using something called JSX, which is short for JavaScript syntax. Oh, okay, JSX. Okay, it's a dynamic markup language, and what it does is it allows you to write HTML inside your JavaScript files, so you don't have to have a separate HTML file for every single component that you make. So that's why it's really popular in the industry. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to creating these different parts of your website, and that allows a lot of like opportunities to collaborate with other people, and it just offers a lot of support in like the development of your application. So we're going to jump right into what components are. So you're going to be seeing like this kind of code a lot when you're developing. So in the past, a lot of people used to create components like this, right? they'd create a class component, and it's really verbose. And all you need to know is that because React is such like it's such of a it's always evolving because of how much support there is in the developer community. People have managed to simplify all this code on the right-hand side into something simple like this. So essentially, when we're working with components, you have a function that just returns a bunch of HTML. And we'll see this a lot more as we go, okay? So just keep in mind that we'll be working more with these functional components because that's more, it's simpler to work with this, and it's more popular in the industry right now. So let's hop right into the code. So I'm going to drop in the chat a link to our starter project. So we're going to be using Code Sandbox, which is a free online IDE. So what that means is that you can get right into web development without with minimal setup. So you don't have to worry about installing all of the different dependencies, different files involved in creating a web app. So we can just focus right into coding, okay? So let's pull that up. Oh, right. Okay, so this is the starter project that we're going to be working with. So what we're going to be building today is a discount YouTube gallery, okay? So we're going to be working with a lot of components today, and throughout this project, we're going to be covering topics like components and props and working with state, okay? So those are the three main concepts that we're going to be covering today. And hopefully we can learn a couple new things as we go, okay? All right, so everyone, I'll post that link again. Feel free to hop onto that link and we can start coding. And as we're waiting for everybody to get set up, I guess I can just like introduce you to what are the files that we're looking at. Just work our way through this. So right away, we see this file app.js. Okay, so remember when I mentioned how React was it was really powerful because of how it renders everything as a single page application. Well, when you're working with just HTML and like CSS, you would have each page as like a big HTML file, and that could get really messy. So so this is like the starter file that you get when you install the React app. So we could clear this up a bit because and just like clean up a bit of noise. Okay. So for React, it's a single page application. So what happens is we have this like little tag, which is the root element. And from that, we just have an empty page right now, okay? So it's just a blank empty page. And what React does is in this app.js file, what it does is it searches for that it searches for that roots element, and it renders this app.js file. So it basically copy pastes whatever you have in this app.js file, and it converts it into like just HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Okay, that's all there is to it. So in the end, we're still working with like just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay. So over here, we have our app.js file. And what it's rendering right now is just a couple tags. So we can type in some text. Oh yeah, and another thing that we're going to be encountering a lot is we're going to be stumbling across a lot of bugs today. So don't worry, bugs are really great because they just tell you what you need to fix. So don't be alarmed when you see this like red, like this red dark page, like this. All right. So what we're going to be covering is components. So the way the files are split up is that in our index.js file, what we have is we're rendering a component. So this is like a special kind of HTML tag. So it just inserts this into our like the index.html page that like somebody when they're visiting this website, they see this, they just see this page, and it just inserts the translated like HTML into this section, right? And I see like, yeah, we can remove the playing attribute. Oh, so that also brings up a really good point. So when you're working with React, you're going to be working with a lot of components. So these components are usually like little bits of code that other people have made in the past, and they made sure that these like bits of code were tested really well and that they did what they were expected to do. So in your components, there's something called props, and props are just like they're the properties that you pass into each component to change the behavior of how they appear. So I see in the chat like a lot of people are saying, oh, we can remove the playing so that when we load the page, it doesn't play automatically. So let's try doing that. So, and if we refresh our page, it'll stop playing automatically. So you're going to notice that we have a couple of import statements, right? So we're importing like React and React Player, which is this component over here. So when we go to our package.json, this is a list of all the different dependencies, different bits of code that we need to get our React app running. So as you see, like we're using React, right? So we definitely need that over here. We're using the React DOM. So that's the interactive like UI that we're working with in our single page application. And we're also using this React Player component, which just renders that YouTube video embedded in our page. So also, I'd like to cover like, we just have a bit of like CSS over here. Since this is a React course, we won't be covering CSS too much. And like just a data file for later. So this is to like render all the different components later on. So let's start off by creating a folder, and let's name it components, okay? And if we're going to create this gallery, right? Let me pull it up so you guys can see it again. If we're going to create this gallery, we're noticing that we're working with a couple of components. We've got like a grid. We've got like the gallery component that's hosting all of these like different videos, right? So each of these videos can be their own component. So we're going to be building two React components today. So we have our grid and our like each of these individual boxes. So let's create two files for those boxes. So let's create a gallery file and a box file. All right, so
Eden,
let's start off.
I have a question in the chat.
Oh, sure.
Aiden wants to know, why is there a JS file exclusively for holding a variable that contains a bunch of videos?
Oh, okay, that's a really good question. You know, we could actually simplify this, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to sort of create like a mock backend. So it'll just like, we'll be pretending to have like our own server in the background. So we're just going to be exporting this like variable containing a bunch of links, and we're going to be transforming each of these links into their own like video. So let's start off with this component. So when we're building a component, we want to start off by we're going to be using React. So let's import React. And let's create our first component of the day. So we're going to be using that syntax that I showed earlier to create this component. Oh, yeah, that's a good point, Aiden. Yeah, there might have been like some, yeah, we're missing a quotation mark there. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. Okay. Cool. So we have this component, our box component, and what we're going to do is, let's just start off by returning just a div tag, okay? Just so we know that it's there. So over here, if we want to render that component, if we want to include that as part of our file, we're going to try to import it into this file by we're just going to import that file, and when we render components in, it's just like HTML. We just create it like HTML. Oh, okay, hold up. Oh, right. That's because okay, so when you're creating these components, you want to make sure that you're exporting them as well, so they can be imported into other files. So that's what I forgot to do over here. So let's export this box. So over here, you see we've successfully rendered our component, our box component over here. So that's nice. So for each of these boxes, what we're supposed to see is a bunch of like buttons, a bunch of buttons. So, oh yeah, and one thing that I also wanted to cover was what's called JSX. So remember, it was like JavaScript extension, which was a dynamic markup language, so that what you can do is you can embed JavaScript into like this HTML that your component is rendering. So normally, like if you wanted to do like an expression like 1 + 1, it'll just take it. It'll just like pretend. It'll interpret it as a string. But what if you wanted to like actually have the expression show up as like 2? You just wrap it around in these curly braces, and then it would treat this as JavaScript, and it'll evaluate the expression in here, and then it'll output whatever expression it is as HTML. So what we're going to do is, we know that for each of these boxes, we want to have like this video. So let's just copy and paste this React player that we had in our app.js, and we'll just throw it in here. And we're going to get an error. That's fine, because we have to import our React player. So let's import that right now. From React player, OK. And there we go. So now our box is just one of these video players. So if we go back to like our app.js and we wanted to create more boxes, what we can do is we can just copy more. And now we have two. Now we have two of these boxes. And we can actually shorten this up. So instead of like having an opening and closing tag, we can just have it as one tag. So this helps clean things up a bit. OK. Now let's work on our gallery for now. And what we want to see is we want to see like a 3x3 grid of different. This is what we want to see. We want to see a 3x3 grid of buttons. And when we click these buttons, a video will pop up. So I really should have started off with that, actually. Whoops. OK.
Eden.
Yep.
While we're here, Rafi has a question. They want to know how much JavaScript do they need to know to be able to learn React properly?
Oh, that's a really good question. So you would need to like most of React is JavaScript. So you have to be like you're going to be working with it a lot. So being comfortable with it will help you a lot in like learning React as well. Okay, so like going back to that like example, we want a 3x3 grid of buttons. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create our gallery component as well. So we'd have to import React. And then we'll create that gallery component here. And then you have to remember to export it as well. And then let's just return like something to show that it works. And then if we go back to our app folder, let's have our gallery in here. And of course, we have to import it as well. Import. OK, so it looks like it works. It shows up our gallery for now. So what we want to do next is we want to go back to our boxes so we can create like a button. So let's create that button right here. And let's just have it say like click me for now. OK. So if we go back to our app.js, what we can do is like since this is like just HTML as well, we can treat it as HTML. So we can throw in a couple of these boxes inside our gallery. So let's see what's going on here. OK, there we go. Okay, so we've got our gallery and we've got our box. So now we want to actually make it look like what we want it to look like. So going back to this example, we want like our free by free grid of boxes. And like since we already have a bit of like styling from here, let's go to our box component. And what we want to do is when we click this button, we want it to show our React like player component. So when we click it, it'll show this video instead of the button. So here's where like JSX comes in handy, where it allows you to like conditionally render components so that you can show components exactly when you want to, like based off of some like logic with JavaScript. So let's say like oh right, okay, and in order to do that, when we click on this button, we want to set something called the state of this component, so that it knows that once it's clicked, it knows to show the YouTube video, right? So we're going to be using something called a React hook, which allows us to do exactly that. So don't worry about the syntax right now. We're going to be using this useState hook, and what it does is it allows you to set the state of each of these components so that it remembers that once it's clicked, it should show a button. It should show the video. So the special syntax of this hook is like this. So what you do is you define like some variable to hold the state. So let's say like it's a display video and a function. The second argument of this list is a function, which let's call it set display video. Or even better, set display video. And then when we're using this React hook, we want to make sure that we define the initial state variable here. So let's set it as false for now. So we don't want the button, or we don't want to see the video until we click the button. So this is where JSX comes in handy. So this variable over here, display video, is just a it's set to false, right? So we can set that. And what we can do is we can use a ternary expression so that if this is true, if we want to display this video, then we're just going to copy paste that and throw this in. Oh, something. There we go. So right now, what this piece of code says is that if we want to display the video, then we show the video. In this case, we don't want to. So because it's false, we don't want to show the video right now. So instead, we show this button. So now that we have that set up, when we click the button, we want to show the video, right? So we want to somehow have some interaction. So we want to set this display video to true when we click the button. So we're going to use the onClick handler. And what we're going to do is when we click this button, we want it to do something, right? So, or let's do like, let's make sure that when we click the button, it does something. see what's going on here. Like, oh, okay, let's start over from there. So this arrow function notation, what it does is when you click the button, it does whatever's inside this curly brace. So right now we just want to like know that we clicked the button. So if we click it here, we see that this pops up. Yep. Let me know if there are any questions. Yeah, so when you click this button, it calls this function. In this case, the function is just alerting you to say hi. So what we can do is we can, instead of just alerting it, we can use this function that we declared in this use state, right? So we can just set display video to true. Now when you click this button, it'll call the function, and it'll set the display video to true. And then it'll look at this JSX expression, and because it's true, it'll render the button instead of this. Or sorry, because this is true, it'll render the video now instead of the button. But that's a really like powerful feature of React. It's the ability to conditionally render elements. So if you're working with like just HTML, if you're working with just HTML, then each time you change the page, each time something changes within the page, you have to reload it in order for the changes to show. But for React, because of the way it's built, it allows you to update the different components in your page without refreshing. So that's a really powerful feature of it. So now that we have that set up, before we had like some like predefined styles. So let's make use of that. Okay. So we defined a style for a box, okay? And all it does is it shows a button at first, and when you click it, it'll generate the video. Okay, so now we can work on our grid, our gallery. So what we can do over here is we know we want to be importing a bunch of these like boxes. We want like 9 of them in total. So what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly import our box component from here. And what we're going to do is we'll just use our like gallery for now. And the way it's set up right now is if you paste like a bunch of boxes, let's say, let's just throw in 6 of them. It'll display it in a grid like this. So now what we actually want to do, I should have done this earlier. Oh, right, okay. We want the button to fill up the entire box. So right over here, we'll just give this button the CSS style that we had. Now we have our like, you can see like how it's coming together now. When you click on this button, it'll pop up this video, and right now it's not that clean right now. It will do for now. We'll work on that. So we have a bunch of these like box elements, but it can get a bit messy. So instead of that, what we're going to do is this. So remember that this like variable that has a bunch of links? What we can do is we can transform each of these links into a box element so that it shows like the video. So let's just quickly import that file. I think you have to do this.
We do have a question as well.
Yep.
So I think participants are wondering what the character after display video right above the player is. It's kind of blurry on screen share.
Oh, what the character is after
Display video right above the player.
Right above the player.
Yeah, if you could zoom in, that would be great.
Oh, this question mark?
I believe so.
It's just. Oh, is it the question mark?
Clarify it in the chat if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, if someone can explain that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we want to do is we want to transform each of these links, each of these like YouTube URLs into their own little box. So what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, we're going to import our array. And let's just like quickly make sure that that worked. So yeah, okay. So when this gallery component renders, it'll log something in the console. And over here, we see like there was an array. And oh yeah, it's a bit messy, but you'll see that we have an array loaded in. So we can close that. So now what we can do with that array is we can use this we can use the map function. So what it does is it just transforms each of the elements in our array into something that we want. So each of these elements, let's say, let's just give it a name. Each of these elements are like a URL or a link. And what we want to do is we want to transform it into a box. So we can do our box. Or yeah, we can map it as a box. And then hold up. All right, and since it's a function, we'll be returning it. So now we have like 9 links, right? And for each of the links, it transformed it into these boxes. So each time you clicked on it, it'll generate something new. And yeah, I forgot to like do something with the styling so that this video stayed inside of whatever box it's in. Oh, okay, I see. So let's just quickly. Oh, okay. What we can do actually is this. If we go back to our box component, our like mystery box component, what we can do is we can use these props. So for the React player, there's this, we could set the height and the width of our React player. So since each of these boxes are like, I think it was like 300 by 300 pixels, we can set the height of each of these videos to 300. Hold up, sorry. Like, this is so weird. Okay. Heights. and we could set it to 300 pixels, and we could set the width to 300 pixels as well. Now it's contained inside the box. So if we want to have like other videos other than like the Rickroll, like what we can do is we can pass in each of our links, and we can take in a prop from this box component. So for each component, we can throw in our own little attributes. So we can customize each of these components however we like. So over here, this box takes in a props, which is like, it's an object that just contains all the components or all the attributes that we want. And one attribute that we want to pass into this box is our URL. So let's set that. Let's throw in our URL. And when we go into our, when we display the URL over here, instead of like this link, we actually want the URL from our props. So props.url. And then now you see we have like different videos now. Yeah. Some of them are still Rickroll videos, but we have different videos from our data.js file. Yeah, so if we like just clean this up, and like reload the page, now we have that gallery that we wanted from the beginning. So each time we clicked on these buttons, each of these components, they have their own state. So when we go to like our box component, you see how for each of the like boxes, it has its own state defined, so that when you click on one of these boxes, it only affects that box. It doesn't affect the other components, which is like another reason why React is so great, because it allows you to interact with these components knowing that they each have their own state, so they won't affect the other parts of your web app. So what if we wanted to in our gallery, what if we wanted to pass in the data from our app.js file instead of like having it inside our gallery? Well, that is a really simple fix. So what we'll do is we'll have our gallery, which is a component in itself, also take in some props. And in these props, it'll take in our URL. Or even better, what we can do is, since we know props is an object, we can use destructuring, which is a way to like select the different kinds of attributes that you want. So we know that we're going to be passing in a URL for our props. And then, oh no, we're not passing in a URL. We're passing in some data. And we know that our data is going to be a bunch of links for a bunch of these links. So when we go back to our app.js file, we can import our data from there instead of from the gallery. And then we can throw in our data as a prop. Or we'll call this links. Or sorry, we'll call it data. We're passing in the data into our gallery component, and in our gallery component, it will read in this data as it's one of the props, and it'll map each of these as each of the elements of this data object, which is like each of the URLs, as into our mystery box with the link to our video. So I hope that didn't confuse too many people. And yeah, now we have our finalized gallery, our discount YouTube. And what we can do now is, now that we've created that, we can actually, what's it called? We can publish this as our own little website from Sandbox, Code Sandbox. So if you go to this deployment button on the side, what you can do is, if you're logged in with your Google or your GitHub account, you can just deploy it as a site. And then what you can do from there is you can customize this so it's your own little project, and you can share it with your friends. So right now, usually takes a couple of minutes to deploy. So while we're waiting for that, I guess that wraps up the coding part of this workshop. And yeah, so you can share that website, that React app that you created from scratch with your friends, and you can take on this Hack It Forward challenge. All right. So yeah, that wraps up the workshop today. Yeah, thanks Emily for posting that.
All right. Thank you so much for that workshop, Eden. That was definitely very educational, and I'm sure the participants have had a lot to take away. If you guys have any other questions or you want to just clarify some things, feel free to drop them in the chat right now. And as Emily just posted, oh, we do actually have a question. Someone wants to know if you can explain props again.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely should have spent more time on that. So for props, what they are is whenever you're trying to customize each of your components, let's say over here we have our box component. When you're declaring it and you're passing in these components, all of these components are collected in an object called, usually it's called props, but you could name it whatever you want. But it's usually conventional to name it props. Over here, we could have named it I don't know, my props. And then that's still an what's it called? It's still an object. So we can still access the data that was inside this object underneath the name my props. So the naming doesn't matter too much. But just think of it like an object that contains all the different information that you want to pass into the component. Yeah, thanks, Oren, for asking that question.
We also have another question from Oren. He wants to know why React is better than HTML and CSS.
Oh, so a huge reason why um, React is like better, or it's not necessarily better, but it's more performative for larger scale applications. So if you're working with just like HTML and CSS, it can get a bit messy when you're working with a larger project, and especially if you want like the user to interact with their web page. So in our case, we wanted to have the like whoever's visiting this website, we want them to be able to interact with it, right? So whenever they click this button, it show a video that could play. Whereas if you were to just use like HTML and JavaScript, each time you interacted with this web page and it changed something that you wanted to show, the entire page would have to refresh. And sometimes that can lose, like your application can lose a lot of the data that it stored, and it takes time. So React makes this kind of like changes a lot more interactive and fast. Do we have any other questions?
No, I think we should be good. Actually, just let me take a look again. Oh yeah, Kenson wants to know what the virtual DOM is used for.
Oh, okay. So the virtual DOM is it's just a way to render in the different parts of your website when you need it to, so that you can have like a lot of interaction with the what the users see on so when someone visits your website, they only see one page, and that page can change. The different components in that change can change, so that it doesn't have to reload each time. So because of that, the virtual DOM makes it so that React is more like, it's more efficient when you're trying to load in these new changes. Yeah.
Alrighty, I think that's all the questions for now. We do have some Waterloo related questions in the chat, but I will let you take them up after we've stopped recording the workshop. For all of you guys who have joined us today, thank you so much for being here. You guys can continue talking in the chat, and I think Eden can stick around for a little bit just to talk to you guys as well. Just as a reminder, if you haven't already signed up for your attendance, and if your registration name is different from what is being shown on Google Meets right now, make sure you DM our community coordinator, Lewis, with the password React, so that your attendance can be counted and you will hopefully be eligible to win one of the prizes. Also, Emily dropped in the link to the Hack It Forward challenge for this workshop, and I'll send it in again as well. Oh, she did it already. All right. So make sure you tackle that challenge as well. We do have prizes related to Hack It Forward challenges. We have 3 prizes allocated for that. But aside from that, oh, actually, let me turn my camera on. Yeah. Aside from that, we should be all good to wrap up the workshop here. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. And if you guys have more questions for Eden, feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you so much to Eden as well for presenting.
Thank you everyone for showing up and being so supportive throughout this workshop. I actually had a couple like last remarks regarding like things that I wish I knew sooner when I was learning React, and like just like programming in general. So honestly, like when the Learnathon like started, I remember watching like there was this amazing speaker that talked about the importance of like experimenting and like innovating through play. And I like looking back, I really wish that I started learning off like something like React, like that, to start on the right foot. So there's like a lot of value in trying to learn something new through actually building something with like what you're learning. And like especially when you're building a project and you're working on it with a couple of friends, it makes it really like fun and social and helps you keep like motivated in learning that new skill. And like because there's also that social element attached to it, where like you'd be learning and you'd also be teaching a lot of what you've learned. Yeah, and like in the chat, I see like a lot of people are saying like participate in hackathons. I think they're also a really great way to meet new people and like work on projects with them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with all of your points. Participating in hackathons, taking up challenges and projects just to pick up new skills is always a good way to learn. But that about wraps it up. Feel free to stick around if you guys have any questions, and I will be turning off the recording here. Once again, thank you so much to all of you for being here today. It was a pleasure having you, and it was a pleasure having you present, Eden.
Thank you.